Hi, my name is Jack Williams. I'm the Director of Portfolio Marketing for Hexagon Safety, Infrastructure, and Geospatial Division. And thank you for joining us. I'm excited for this discussion today with one of our valued partners, Dejero. To set the stage, reliable connectivity is critical for most industries and perhaps more so, and obviously more so for public safety. Crucial solutions and technologies, especially operational systems like computer-aided dispatch or systems such as records management, analytics, mobile, and collaboration tools, just to name a few, these need to be available at all times, no matter what the circumstances, due to the nature of public safety. And a large part of ensuring connectivity comes down to how well your agency's technologies and solutions integrate or interface with the various systems and subsystems from different vendors that you'll find in a public safety agency. Especially as more and more agencies are modernizing and moving to next generation and cloud-based solutions. And so with me today to talk about the importance of connectivity and partnerships is Jehan Karim, Dejero's Global Director of Business Development. Welcome, Jehan. Let's jump right in.
Thanks for having me, Jack. And hello, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. And yeah, Jack, I think in terms of the core technologies, I know we're going to talk about NG 911. We're going to talk about legacy infrastructure, but it's quite interesting to see that the ecosystem and the environment is definitely feeling the momentum for the adoption and deployment of these technologies. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to the conversation.
Well, I will say this, Jehan. One thing that gets me excited about this conversation is obviously, in our world, you know, at Hexagon, we have computer-aided dispatch solutions, record solutions, et cetera. And we build cloud-native applications. And the number one question, and you don't have to address this now, but the number one question they always say when moving to the cloud, well, what happens if my internet goes down? And I know you have a great answer for that question. And so we're going to get to that today. So let's talk. So let's set the stage and lay the groundwork for the discussion first. So this is kind of a broad question, right? How do deficiencies in network availability, diversity, reliability, and resilience, how do those impact public safety agencies at a broad level?
Yeah, and I could try to tackle that, right? But if I was to address the scope of the question that you just asked, I think if we look at our lives and how people operate from a day-to-day perspective, everything's connected. You know, there's more large events, there's more critical incidents, there's more disasters, there's more, I guess, need for response as the ecosystem of technology providers is growing, as the ecosystem of the consumption of those technologies is growing. The need for availability, as you said, diversity, reliability, and the need for critical connectivity is very important. And I think it's multifaceted, right? So when you talk about operations, you said, hey, Hexagon is developing or customers adopting a cloud native, ecosystem or environment or set of applications. They have to be available, right? So then you're back to the point of, okay, well, everything has to be connected, everything has to be available, and that connectedness is almost mission critical, right? Because there's multiple teams, there's multiple systems, there's multiple capabilities that have to interoperate. And I would say, if I was to go down the list of availability, diversity, reliability, and the critical nature of comms, I think it's equally juxtaposed with, operation success, the serviceability, because when you're in diverse environments, you could be in North Dakota, you could be in California, you could be in New York, you could be in Hong Kong, you could be in London, right? Those are very diverse environments, right? And you have to be able to adapt to those environments operationally. And then, of course, reliability and critical communications is important because we're talking about life critical missions, right? We're talking about, this is not just business critical. This is not, us just saying mission critical. There's literally lives on the line on both sides, right? You've got first responders that have to be able to coordinate and respond proportionally. And then you've got, the public on the other side, or entities that need the service, that have made the request to access the service. And in all cases, I know and our audience knows that this is life critical operations. So I think that's why it's very important to look at infrastructure from a critical view as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that operational success, you're right. It's critical. You have to have connectivity. And I don't care if you are a cloud-based solution or even an on-premise solution. I guarantee you there's some sort of a line or connection to the internet or to the cloud. And when things go down, I mean, reverting to pen and paper when people's lives are on the line is not good. And that's why I'm really excited to hear what you guys are doing at Dejero. Let's frame it with an example. So let's take a look at, say, a natural disaster or a large scale incident. Sort of that 1%er. You have different types of connectivity options. So when let's say when cellular LTE goes down or fiber goes down, or say it's damaged or even overloaded. I mean, I read a lot of articles about call centers and public safety answering points and communication centers being overloaded by calls and bringing the system down. So when it comes to, let's say, those large scale things or natural disasters, networks being down, what can an agency do to prepare for that?
I think if I think about that question, right, I think agencies today, as you mentioned, right, I mean, by no means is this, I would say a critical response on how agencies are structuring their infrastructure today, because we know when we talk about infrastructure or technologies, we have to keep in mind, the public facing view, the financial view, the policy view, the deployments and training view, the human aspect of how that technology is going to interact with the different operators or consumers of that technology. However, we believe strongly at Dejero that having a redundant and resilient connectivity plan is important. And just as you said, right, we could talk about real life examples, whether you're talking about Tier 1 events like the Super Bowl or the presidential inauguration, which are absolutely massive events, have global exposure and have absolutely massive needs for connectivity, right? Or we could be talking about natural disasters. I mean, we could look at, as close as to the wildfires in Maui and Hawaii, or we can go back to 9/11, right? I mean, there's the diversity of geography, the diversity and the nature of the incident. We know that the key component of that mission critical response is connectivity, right? And it's communications, and it's the ability to exchange information, exchange data, exchange plans, exchange strategic actions that need to be put in place. And I believe that it's important for agencies from a networking perspective, as you alluded to, cellular networks, fiber networks. Traditionally, large agencies or agencies mostly have relied on LMR networks or radio networks or microwave networks. And there's just so much diversity in this area. Right now, we're talking about AI. We're talking about assistive AI with Hexagon. We've got LEO, MEO orbiting satellites instead of your typical geo orbiting satellites. There's so much diversity. Our recommendation as a trusted advisor to public safety entities is always, just as you build your PACE plan, right? You've got your primary, alternative, contingency, emergency, right? The reason you have those levels is because you want to be able to address any level of, failure or any level of compromise at those levels. That's how we recommend agencies build their communications plan, right? And with Dejero Smart Blending technology, it almost kind of transforms that network environment into a seamless single network, right? And we do tell everybody, and we tell all of our customers and all of our partners that it's like buying insurance. You don't need it until you need it, right? But when you need it, you really wish you had it, and you really, really use it, right? And that's kind of how we propose agencies look at their networking infrastructure. And we have customers today that are looking at this capability and trying to see how this can adapt in their environment, which I think is a very important piece. But yeah, I think that's kind of where our initial recommendation or response goes to when we talk to agencies or clients in the industry today.
So as a follow-up to that, Jehan, I like the, you got to take these things into consideration, just like when I was, playing football, you had your primary receiver, your secondary receiver, your tertiary, you make your reads, you want to have a lot of different options. In layman's terms, for the audience out there, and I've had it explained to me, but in layman's terms, I like the way you put it. From a customer's point of view, you look at, when you work with Dejero, you view it as a single connection, but behind the scenes, it's actually, from what I understand, an amalgamation of different types of connectivity options. sort of behind the scenes blended so that it appears as one connection to the end user end system. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of intelligence of sort of aggregating and sort of automatically determining best paths and workflows. And I'm sure, but could you, just for the audience sake, just in layman's terms, describe what Dejero provides in terms of that connectivity resilience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually going to leverage one of my colleagues' examples, right? And I'm not going to throw his name out because I don't have his permission. But one of our public safety experienced public safety colleagues is now working, of course, with the Dejero public safety team, and he uses this example, right? So you've got a single straw that you can use to consume a liquid out of a container, right? And with the Dejero, you could imagine using multiple straws together and removing a liquid or removing materials out of a container. Now, it's very simple. When you're building your house and you've got plumbing running across your house, the faucet pipe is not the same size as the pipe that's removing water or providing water to the facility, right? So Dejero's ability to take all of these diverse channels, all these diverse pipes, all these different transports, and make them look like a single pipe. It looks like a single pipe, which means you've got more capacity, which means you've got more redundancy and resiliency because it looks like one access. If any one of them is impacted, if any one of them is degraded, if any one of them's kind of facing an issue, we can flag it to the customer, right? We can tell you, hey, there's an issue with this network. There's an issue potentially you may want to look at, but it looks like a single network. So you've got that resiliency aspect, right? Where you're not relying on just your fiber or just your microwave or just your cellular or just your SATCOM, right? So you've got the capacity, you've got the resiliency, and then moreover, as customers move into more mobile environments, more remote environments, more virtual environments, customers talking about virtual EOCs, virtual PSAPs, they want to have mobile command capability. Clearly, when you move from, downtown LA to maybe the desert, right, you're not going to have the same level of network availability and connectivity. So with Dejero, you get the mobile diversity, right? If truly all networks are saying that they can be the best network for the client, well, clearly, if you have access to all networks, you are creating the best chances for your mission to have successful outcomes, right? So with Dejero, you can think about it as a virtual network of networks, right? We've got the ability to aggregate the capacity across multiple networks. We've got the ability to create that interoperability and diversity as a seamless network. And then last but not least, as I said, is we bring value to mobile operations because the mobile operations are just so much more simplified because we're actually squeezing the best out of the network environment for our customers.
That's awesome. And I think to everybody listening to this right now, I mean, this solves a big problem. And the fact that you can have that resiliency amongst all these different channels and it comes to you as a service, as a virtual network of networks, solves the connectivity problem. And it's why Hexagon loves to partner with companies like Dejero. First time I heard about the technology from one of our colleagues who's working with you guys, I was like, this is amazing. I want to talk to these guys. I love the concept. It solves a practical problem. Your secret sauce is what makes you. And so again, I encourage everyone listening to take a look at this. So you just mentioned the field aspect, right? We've got a lot of new technologies coming online. We've got next generation 911. We've got integration of video. We've got mobile command centers, like you were just talking about, rich mobile capabilities. I mean, there's just a lot going on in the field. Connectivity in the field has traditionally been a challenge. I mean, I live in rural West Virginia, so connectivity can be a challenge when I go to my camp up in the mountains, right? How does that how does that insufficient bandwidth or those irregularities, how does that affect operations? Can you give me some examples or talk? I mean, how does that negatively affect operations in a public safety environment?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we talk about the public safety environment, right, if we're just trying to weigh the impact of this type of availability or unavailability of this type of capability, the network redundancy and connectivity is, it's not that far back. It seems like a long time ago, right? But when everyone was impacted by the pandemic, right, and all of a sudden you have to set up your office at home, right? You're so reliant on your Wi-Fi connection that all of a sudden you're noticing, hey, who else is on the Wi-Fi, who's watching YouTube, who's playing games, like what's happening to all my bandwidth. I'm buying all this bandwidth, but it's seemingly not enough for my operations because I've got all this workload that's coming to it, right? So back to your question, you were talking about all these new technologies that are getting introduced. It's not just voice anymore. It's not just, radio anymore. It's not just messaging anymore. We're talking about video. We're talking about real-time audio. We're talking about UCAS systems. We're talking about AI, assistive AI that needs to be layered on top of it to improve the response and kind of make it more efficient, right? It's very simple, right? You've got this box, which used to be kind of occupied with maybe one or two legacy communications technologies, right? And they're very reliable, very important, clearly very much adopted, right? Now you've got the evolution of that, right? With, of course, first being the migration to IP from analog, and then, of course, the internet, and then the hyper-connectedness, as they call the hyperscalers. And then now you've got the cloud migration, now you've got 5G, you've got AI. And I think it's very similar, right? Is as human beings, as consumers of these services, these public safety services, our day-to-day interactions with technologies are becoming more immersive, right? You and I right now are on a video conversation that's being live streamed, right? Or it's going to be streamed to our audience, right? This requires the evolution of infrastructure. This requires the reliability of infrastructure. This requires the availability of infrastructure. So when we now mirror that against public safety operations, right? And again, this is not far away from ourselves, right? I like to think about it on a very personal note, right? If I'm having my son or my daughter, right, or my family or my colleague or my friend calling 911 and they can't get through because, they're not in coverage, or they can't get through because there's a large scale event taking place and there's too much crowding, or they did get through, but the messaging wasn't clear and the call got dropped, or they can't be located, right? There's all these things that pop up when we start talking about new technologies being adopted for public safety, and we talk about public safety operations. I think it's just that critical that these infrastructure requirements move with the consumers asked to interact with these technologies and these operations, right? So if I'm calling over a cell phone, if I'm expecting to drop, a picture of the scene, if I'm expecting to send live video from a fire or from an emergency event, we want to be able to not only support that for our customers, we want our customers to be able to take that confidently and say, hey, if we're building technology plans, we want to be able to have, as you said, live video, text, audio, CAD RMS, cloud-based systems, assistive AI, and we want to run that confidently. Right? And just as you said, customers, the first question they'll have is, hey, is this moving to the cloud? What about my internet? Right. Yeah. And I've had this conversation with customers, especially in remote areas where you talk about Colorado, talk about West Virginia, right? They're like, hey, I barely have internet at home, right? You're asking me to remove my infrastructure from my premise and put it in the cloud. Can I reach it? Right. And if you move all your infrastructure and all your applications to the cloud, the need for reliable connectivity is just immense, right? And that's why we emphasize that with our clients, and that's what we truly believe.
Excellent answer, Jehan. So let's, that was a great answer to that question, by the way. Let's look at when it comes to, I guess, legacy versus next generation, or in the public safety world, they a lot of people are still, quote unquote, on premise. And a lot of folks are, looking at cloud applications. So when we look at connectivity considerations, when it comes to, I know the cloud's an obvious one, but also on-premise or legacy solutions. What are the different connectivity considerations you need to take into account with regards to both on-premise and the cloud? I think the cloud's more obvious, but I'd be curious to get your take on even on-premise.
No, absolutely. I think on-premise versus cloud, right? We're still talking about a few different aspects that require very reliable infrastructure, right? Connectivity is part of it, right? But I mean, whether we're dealing with 911, whether we're dealing with, command and control, whether we're dealing with situational response, whether we're dealing with aerial operations, right? We like to think of it as infrastructure, right? Just as if you're building a big facility and you're not going to the cloud, you're building a data center and you have redundant fiber paths going to it, you're going to make sure you have redundant power supplies. You're going to maybe make sure you have redundant water supplies. You're going to make sure maybe you have redundant exit paths for people if in case there's a fire, right? It's from our perspective, we like to think of it, and I like to approach it from I would say, analogous to regular life perspective, right? So when we talk about legacy technologies versus stuff like NG911, and NG911 is quite a broad term, right? It's like defining artificial intelligence, or like defining SD-WAN. It's like defining, social media. It's a very broad term. But the long and short of it is, for people to move from legacy environments to next generation environments, they have to make investments of time, people, and more, money, which is typically government funded, right? Which is tax dollars, right? So you and I and our audience are putting money into these systems so that they can be fielded, so that they can get a service, right? You want to get the best return on your investment, right? Whether it's a people investment, a time investment, or a financial investment. And just as you would want to have redundancy and reliability in your power infrastructure, right? In your water infrastructure, you want to have redundancy and reliability in your connectivity infrastructure and your network infrastructure. And as you said, this is not just pertaining to cloud environments, right? Some folks or customers that may have infrastructure on-prem, they still need to have reliable access to those applications on-prem. And the example I'll give you is this, right? We all use our phones, right? Whether you're an Apple user or an Android user, doesn't matter, right? You take a picture, you store contacts, you make a phone call, you send an email, right? And everything's fine. You're doing your stuff. Whether you have an LTE connection or not, you take a picture. And maybe we're talking about, let's say you're in a cellular denied environment. You can still take a picture, right? You can still make a voice record. You can still maybe use GPS because your GPS antenna is not getting an LTE signal. It's working off of a different signal, right? But in the background, this device is hyper connected, right? For it to actually bring value to you, and then, in a month or so, or in a year, tell you, hey, by the way, you guys were in Arizona, or by the way, you guys were in London, or by the way, you guys were in Japan, here's a memory. Every app tells you, hey, what about background refresh, right? These components are becoming so hyper connected that even if I have a system that's self-contained and in my pocket or in my bag, right, it needs to have some type of access, some type of capability to connect to the larger global environment, right? And you can say, hey, customers got their own data center, like you said, it's on-prem. They're definitely using services that are internet connected, right? And I think that's where connectivity and networking become very important for them.
Totally agree. Whether they realize it or not, there's some sort of threat out there to the broader cloud or broader internet. And yes, those might be, secure, but I mean, there is a need for reliability, even if you're not a fully deployed managed service cloud solution. Connectivity resilience is still important, and hopefully people do understand that. All right, let me pivot for a second. So, you guys are the connection experts, right? Or the hyper connected experts. How important, because you're taking care of that part of the equation, or that challenge, you're solving that. But you're going to have to work with these systems, other systems, right? Operational systems who rely upon the connectivity, the field mobile solutions that rely on this connectivity. They're typically from other vendors, other partners like ourselves. How important is it? How important is it for an agency to work with vendors who, just to put it frank, get along? Work with vendors who can integrate well, who can communicate well, who know how to, I come from the interfacing backgrounds. You got the technology aspect of it, but then you got the workflows, and you got the communication. I've dealt with some vendors from other public safety systems that aren't the most open, and talking about, hey, my REST API, how do I do this? How do I do that? How important is it that agencies get partners who get along?
I couldn't emphasize that enough, right? I think that is something that is almost as mission critical as the mission, right? And as you said, it's the technological interoperability, it's the people communicating, it's the operational interoperability. And just yesterday, we were on a call with a client, right? They're like, hey, we're dealing with a wildfire, and this is multiple wildfires happening right now, right? And these wildfires, you've got federal agencies responding, you've got state and local agencies responding, you got counties responding, you got people flying in from other countries. For example, in Canada, we had people coming in from other countries to support the wildfire response because it was just so massive, right? you think about that environment, it is so haphazard. It is so potentially disconnected. The ability to communicate and interoperate is massive, right? And it's so crucial to the mission. So as you said, finding partners and people that not only lay a foundation of interoperability, but a foundation of let's work towards a mutual outcome, right? It is very, very important, right? And I think, and again, traditionally, I don't think it was very intentional for people to have siloed systems, right? It was just that, hey, I've got my CAD, and I've got my dispatch, I've got my mapping, I've got my command and control guys, I've got my special operations guys, I've got there's reasons why people have developed all these capabilities and have siloed approaches, right? But I think there's absolute value, and there's a reason why all these organizations connect at the top, right? They connect at the top so that they can disseminate information back down and continue the operation. So what we're saying and what you're saying is, well, you should have cross communication paths at all levels, right? Whether it's the technology providers, whether it's the the operational guys, whether it's the integrators, whether it's the software providers or the hardware providers or the network providers. I think it's absolutely tantamount to these decisions that are being made in this public safety spaces, and that's what we like to think of ourselves, right? Is we are the network providers, as you said, the hyper connected network providers. A network is only as good as what you can do with it, right? And if you look at your standard, I'll say, carrier commercial, right? They don't advertise to you and I and our customers, hey, our network's the best network, so use our network. They have to showcase what can you do with that network, right? How does that network enable your day-to-day operations? How does it bring value to your life? How does it connect you to your home, to your family, to your work, to the rest of the world, right? So we as network providers have to be very well versed in connectedness, right? That API that you talked about, like that API can be like a human to human API, that could be a REST API, that could be any of those things, right? But I would like to think that in our DNA and our operational approach has that kind of sentiment to it, right? We have to operate in a way that we can communicate with everyone, we can operate with everyone, and not be proprietary. Because as soon as you get proprietary, you're creating a silo and potentially creating, barricades between the information exchange that's needed for these types of clients.
Yeah, excellent. I can say right off the bat, I mean, you guys have been great to work with in the projects that I'm aware of. And I think it is very important if you're an agency or someone who works in the public safety sphere to know that, your different vendors, because there's many of them in the space and they've solved different functional areas. It's very important that they get along and they have that mentality that I've seen personally from Dejero, where you're willing to work with the other partners, because ultimately connectivity enables you, but you still have to do something with it. And then on the vice versa, on the operational side, you can do a lot, but you have to have connectivity in order to do it. So you best well get along. Right. And be able to integrate and have that mentality. So yes, you're right. It's a technical challenge and approach, and it's a mentality from a culture perspective amongst vendors. And I will say you guys do a great job of that. Last question here. So obviously, and Hexagon's a very global company. We were chatting before this and about some of the different places in Canada that that I've ventured to, but I mean, I'm sure you all have traveled quite a bit, have traveled all over the world. Things are different country to country. And so how does Dejero support sort of the global aspect, the global network of communication providers, and make it easy for customers? Meaning, I know the American and North American environment's a lot different than the EMEA environment versus Asia Pac versus India versus Latin America. Can you give us a little insight into how Dejero handles that from a global perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would start off with kind of the way I'm framing the response to the question, right? Is again kind of drawing an analogy to how we live our day-to-day lives, right? We, as you said, travel all over the world. We experience communications with people from all over the world. And when we travel all over the world, our connectedness varies, right? It depends on where you are, what time of day it is. what's happening from a social or geopolitical perspective. And the way Dejero kind of provides the technology that's needed to have global connectedness, right, is by being aware of the environment that we're operating in, right? So the way I'll respond to your question is like it's multiple levels, right? So there is the technology aspect, right? So our core technology is not reliant or proprietary to any specific geography, right? And we have clients and customers that have global reach and global operations that are, as you said, operating in North and South America, operating in EMEA, APAC, right? All the way down to Australia. They've got operations, they've got divisions, they've got branches where they're operating on a day-to-day basis, on a daily basis, right? So we're kind of helping them conduct the mission, but I think we're doing a service to them and ourselves by actually absorbing what we're learning from the diverse geographies, the diverse cultures, the people that we're interacting with, and kind of bolstering the other side of it. Just as you said, is the human-to-human communication is also very important, right? So for Dejero, it's important for us to provide local time zone support. It's important for us to provide local personnel support. It's important for us to provide in-country support, right? So from a tech perspective, yes, we're open to any IP network, and we'll plug into any IP network and try to, aggregate that as part of the overall connectivity. But I think from an operational perspective and a people perspective and a cultural perspective, we're also trying to provide a capability that's useful and usable by our clients, right? And the one example I will give you is, we talk about global customers, right? So you've got an enterprise client that's maybe running, let's call it airports, right? Or running public safety operations that are, beyond multiple countries. And they've got day-to-day operations, they've got things that are running. So you kind of get into the gist of it and you kind of get in the groove and you understand how to operate the network, right? But then you've got customers that go into environments, right? And that's mostly public safety customers. But again, as you said, public safety customers in North America, you take that and let's say you change your area of responsibility, right? Or your domain of operations to the entire world, right? We've got customers that have to show up in environments and have no idea where they're going to be. They might be in Alaska one day, they might be in Bahrain the other day, they might be in Japan the next day. And they're using our systems because of the versatility of the technology and because of the capability of the support team behind the technology, right? So we feel very confident with partners like Hexagon that have a global reach, our customers that have global reach, and Dejero that has an approach to hopefully supporting and understanding global reach, that our technology and our people and our operations with our partners can provide a level of service that's sufficient and necessary for customers that have global reach and global operations.
Excellent, John. So before I leave, I do want to ask, is there anything any parting words that you'd like to tell to the audience before we jump off here?
Again, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the platform and of course the audience for the time. If there's one parting thought that I would leave with, it just as a technology provider and partner, right? As I said, and I'm sure as you said, Hexagon does as well, we would like to have a trusted advisor and partner approach because nobody's perfect, right? I'm not going to sit here and be like, hey, Dejero's perfect and everything's awesome and we're just going to come in and fix all your issues and it's going to be for $0 and we're going to do it yesterday, right? That's not the case, right? But what we will do is we'll come to the table, we'll have an honest approach, we'll listen first, and then we'll consult you in developing a solution with all the partners and the people in the ecosystem, right? And I think that's what I'll leave the conversation with is we are ready to listen, we're ready to capture the requirements, we're ready to understand what is it the customer needs before we start throwing products at you, before we start throwing prices at you, right? And I think we are just looking for more conversations just like this one and conversations with the clients.
Excellent. I agree. Public safety is not easy. It's hard. And anybody who says that is lying to you. And the candidness and the humbleness to know that we don't have all the answers, but we're going to sit down and work with you and figure it out. I like that, John. Big thanks to you and Dejero for participating in this. I encourage our audience to go check out their website, check them out. Like I said, Hexagon works very well with Dejero. Great company, great mentality, great culture, and they're hyper connected. For our audience, thanks for joining today. We'll catch you next time on a follow-up podcast. So thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.